Welcome to Reigniting You, the show that explores a variety of topics and timely issues for making successful mid to late career transitions with a renewed sense of purpose and fulfillment for the next phase of your career and life, regardless of your age. Now, here's your host, Lisa Downs.
Welcome to Reigniting You, where we talk all things career transition for those age 40 plus. I'm Lisa Downs, Seattle-based career and retirement transition coach. Great to be here with you today, and our producer, Eric. Hey, Eric, how are you today?
Hey, good afternoon, Lisa. I'm doing great.
Good.
Yeah, we've had a very interesting November so far with storms and heavy rain and sunshine and
now sun,
a little bit of everything.
Yeah, a little bit of everything, and even a tornado warning, which is very rare for us out here. So,
and we haven't seen any snow yet, thankfully.
No.
I'm not counting it out.
Me either.
Still got a few days left. So
yeah,
who knows?
Especially with the cold snap we're having suddenly.
Absolutely.
So well, we've got another great show on tap for today. My guest today is Dan Shulman, a shareholder and attorney for the firm of Vedder Price in Chicago, who's here to talk with us about making midlife career transitions. First, though, are a few career-related stories from the last few days. The Associated Press reports that U.S. industrial production rebounded in October as automakers, stung by supply chain problems, posted strong increases, and the adverse effects from a hurricane that struck the nation's energy complex in the Gulf of Mexico faded. Industrial production rose 1.6% last month after a 1.3% plunge in September. The gain was double what had been expected, though. Industrial output in October was also helped by an 11% jump in production of motor vehicles and parts, after 2 months of decline caused by severe supply chain shortages of the semiconductors needed as component parts. In the major industry groups, manufacturing activity rose 1.2%, while mining, which includes oil and gas production, surged 4.1%, and output at the nation's utilities was up 1.2%. Reported by the Idaho Statesman, Boise, Idaho is now the second least affordable housing market in North America. When it comes to housing, only Vancouver, BC is worse for home buyers, according to a new study from Oxford Economics, an economic forecasting company in England. Boise's home prices are 72% above what a median income household can afford, driven by an influx of new virtual workers during the pandemic, among other factors such as perceived affordability pre-pandemic. California, Idaho, Washington, and Utah are all showing signs of people struggling to buy homes on median state incomes, according to the report. The Oxford Economics report found the most affordable cities in the U.S. or Canada to be Chicago, Quebec City, and Columbus, Ohio. So, Eric, what do you think? Thoughts on these first couple of stories today?
Yeah, very surprised to hear about Boise being one of the top housing markets in the country because, apparently I'm with the majority of people that thought Boise is going to be very affordable.
Right.
Idaho, traditionally anyway.
Yeah, traditionally it's been quite affordable.
Because, aside from potatoes, I'm not sure what is going on in Idaho that is particularly desirable to, draw so many people. I mean, I've been there. It's a beautiful place, but, I just don't think of it as being like a tech mecca or something like that would drive up housing markets. So, interesting.
Yeah, it's a lovely state. I think they have some good skiing there and everything and beautiful area. But you don't exactly think of it as like an IT capital.
Right.
Yeah, a mecca to draw people. So kind of interesting. And not surprising though, living here, we're based here in Washington State and, we've been having crazy housing markets for a while now, a number of years and even before the pandemic. And it just seems prices just keep on rising, it seems.
So we feel their pain.
We do.
Literally.
Yeah, it's interesting. I know a couple of folks who've recently moved to Utah. Are probably helping to drive prices up there as well. It seems like, a lot of the states here out west are starting to feel the impacts and especially with, I think, pandemic workers, virtual workers. It's like, I can get out of the cities and, flee the higher prices when in the end all it does is drive it up for everybody.
Right.
Yeah, we've talked a little bit before too about, it'd be interesting to see what happens once we come out of the pandemic more, if there's a boomerang effect and people who move to the smaller towns and more rural areas, if they come flocking back,
Right.
um, once they realize that, maybe there's not the infrastructure that is needed to support so many people.
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
mean, so much depends on what companies are going to do, whether they
Yeah.
require folks to be there in person or they're going to allow more remote work. And, it is interesting with the rural communities. I mean, we really still don't have good broadband
We
that
don't.
is a requirement for
Yeah.
working remote in a lot of places that are somewhat rural. I mean, I know the infrastructure bill just passed and that may change things, but that's going to take time.
It will.
Yeah.
Yeah, and see what the ripple effects of that are. But yeah, I'd say, the broadband infrastructure needs to be there, ensuring that there's not only the housing, but also the amenities, and the
Mhm.
necessities that people need. And yeah, so that'll be really interesting to watch. And but it is good to see that, maybe things are starting to loosen up and improve too, when it comes to manufacturing and production, and hopefully we can get through this supply chain issue
Yeah,
soon. But it is good to see that and those numbers increasing as well. So a little bit of silver lining there and everything.
absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. A couple more news stories here for you. Shares of Amazon backed Rivian Automotive jumped in their initial public offering earlier this month, reports the Associated Press, rising as much as 53% as investors look for the next big winner in the electric vehicle market. The initial closing price of $100.73 gave Rivian a market value of about $85.9 billion, greater than that of Ford and just below General Motors. Noteworthy because they've only delivered about 150 electric pickup trucks so far, compared to the millions of deliveries by Ford and GM. Ford is one of Rivian's high profile backers, having invested a $500 million into the company in 2019. The other is Amazon, which held a 20% stake in Rivian ahead of the IPO. Rivian priced the offering of 153 million shares at $78, giving it proceeds of nearly $12 billion. The company said it will use the money to ramp up production of its trucks, vans, and SUVs. Lastly, the Associated Press reports America's employers boosted their hiring in October, adding 531,000 jobs, the most since July, and a sign that the recovery from the pandemic recession is overcoming a virus induced slowdown. This latest jobs report from the Labor Department also showed that the unemployment rate fell to 4.6% last month from 4.8% in September. That is a comparatively low level, though, still well above the pre pandemic jobless rate of 3.5%. And the job gains in August and September weren't as weak as initially reported. The government increased its estimate of hiring for those 2 months by a hefty combined 235,000 jobs. At the same time, disparities in the job market have persisted. The Black unemployment rate was unchanged in October at 7.9%, for example, while for white workers it fell to 4% from 4.2%. The Latino jobless rate dropped from 5.9% from 6.3%. So, Eric, what jumps out at you from these stories here?
Well, the electric, the vehicle makers rising in value is interesting because
Yeah.
I personally am all completely on board with the EV revolution. I think, it's the logical step forward, and I myself drive an electric vehicle. But Rivian's really unproven thus far.
They are.
I think people are thinking, well, they're going to be the next Tesla. And maybe they will be. I mean, all the prototypes and the stuff looked fantastic. So they've got the potential there, but it's so early. And it just makes me
Yeah.
wonder if investors might be, kind of jumping the gun a little bit, especially when you compare it to other, automakers that have a lot of experience. And I've already, like GM,
Yep.
now they had the problem with the battery recall on the Bolts.
Right.
And I just got my car back. I drive a Bolt and it's got a brand new battery in it, and I couldn't be more happy. So I think when people start getting their cars, having those replaced batteries, and we put this stuff behind them, GM, I think, is in a good position to finally move ahead with their EV sales and the new models that they're looking to release. So it'll be interesting to see how it shakes
Yeah.
out. I really find it interesting when people go crazy with these stocks on unproven
Right. Yeah.
companies, that could go either way. Yeah, we've seen Teslas, but we've also seen, I don't know, lots of other car companies that have attempted to get out there and just have
It
kind of
hasn't
failed.
gone
Yeah.
well. Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. That same story, the 150 EV pickup trucks that they've delivered, most of those are to their employees.
Right.
So it's not like they've got them ready to sell like hotcakes, let's just say. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. But still, I think the electric vehicle market is one to definitely, keep an eye on.
Hmm.
For anyone who's looking to get into an industry, that could be a great one to go into because it
Yeah.
is a burgeoning industry still. And it has a lot of growth potential for sure. So, yeah, that'll be interesting to see, but I'm glad your new battery is
Oh,
working
yeah,
well.
me
Yeah,
too. Thank you.
that's
Yeah,
good.
it's sat at the dealership for about 5 months, so I'm so happy to have it back and not be,
That's good.
paying for gas again, especially considering how gas prices are right now.
Yeah, yeah.
So, yeah, it makes a big difference.
That's another thing too with the infrastructure bill. Do you know, I should have paid more close attention, but, um, is is there money set aside in that for, electric vehicle charging stations and
I
that infrastructure
I believe
in it?
there is, just
Okay.
not as much as they had,
They
initially
wanted?
hoped. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but every little bit counts,
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Yep, that's for sure. It's encouraging to see, too, the unemployment rates.
Yeah.
Wish it was better for people of color. Still having those disparities, which is frustrating. But it's good to see that uh, it is, the unemployment claims and the rate is a bit better. So hiring,
Yeah,
picking up.
hopefully it
So
just continues to drop here
yeah,
in the next several months, and hopefully inflation will turn around too, and we may just have a really strong post-COVID economy,
yeah.
fingers crossed
Fingers
if
crossed.
these things
Right.
keep going in the right
One
direction.
can hope.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, so, on another topic, we've got Thanksgiving coming up
Yes, we
this
do.
week. So, yeah, next few days is Thanksgiving. So, do you have big Thanksgiving plans?
I'm gonna kinda have a small get together at the house, with the
Yep,
friends and family, and
that's
You
good.
know, that's always a good time. I used to go down to California and see the bigger family, but, with things as they are still,
Yeah,
I'm looking at keeping it small this year.
yeah.
We'll see about next year, though.
We'll see. Were you able to host people last year, or did you just keep it?
Yeah, we kept it to, a small group, last year too.
Yeah, that's good.
Everybody was vaccinated, so it was good.
That's good.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
less work in the kitchen
That's
too,
right.
so I was okay with that.
Yeah, I think we're gonna cook a little bit this year. We cooked a little bit last year, but, we're just gonna keep it the 2 of us again and till things settle out some more. But, in the past, sometimes we've gone out for Thanksgiving dinner, so which can be a nice change.
Yeah.
Don't have to cook, and usually they give you, wherever you go who's open on Thanksgiving, usually they still give you plenty of food, so you still can take some leftovers home. Which is nice because that's, I think I just saw a survey recently that, the majority of Americans who were polled about their favorite part about Thanksgiving is the leftovers and think the leftovers actually taste better than the original meal.
I think they may be onto something.
Yeah.
I tend to enjoy the leftovers quite a bit, and often they do taste a little bit better.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to beat like fresh mashed potatoes, though. I mean,
True.
reheating those in the
Yeah.
following days, just it loses
It
a little
loses a
something,
little,
but
yeah.
hard to beat a good turkey sandwich, that's for sure.
It is.
Yeah.
I used to when, he in my family, so heating up the Thanksgiving leftovers, we'd, keep everything separate and just fill your plate. And then when I met Chris's family, my in-laws, they would actually make their turkey sandwiches with the stuffing and the
Mhm.
cranberry side, like everything in the sandwich.
So it's
And that
like a
blew my
Thanksgiving
mind.
dinner
I
on
was like,
on bread.
"Oh, you can do that? That's amazing."
Absolutely.
Great. Anyway, well, an early happy Thanksgiving.
And to you and to all our
You too. Yeah,
listeners.
absolutely. Well, it's already time for our first break. So when we come back, I'll introduce our guest for the show, Dan Shulman, who's here to share about his own mid career journey and issues we need to navigate during our peak career years and more.
Are you feeling challenged or frustrated without a plan for what's next in your career and life? Are you seeing writings on the wall for needing to make a mid to late career change and don't know how or what to do? Coach Lisa Downs of New Aspect Coaching can guide you to what's next, providing a fresh perspective and supporting you to create a clear and compelling vision for your future and a plan to move forward. Call Lisa at 425-216-3015. That's 425-216-3015. New Aspect Coaching, fresh perspectives for your career.
Welcome back to Reigniting You, the show that focuses on all aspects of making mid to late career transitions. I'm your host, Lisa Downs. A note that you can catch the show Voices of Experience with host Paul Casey this Wednesday at 3 p.m. here on KIXI. Voices shines a light on people with experience in their fields of travel, public affairs, adventure, health, and fitness with an emphasis on sustaining your own business. That's Voices of Experience this Wednesday at 3 o'clock. I'm happy to introduce today's guest, Dan Shulman. Dan is a shareholder in the intellectual property group of the law firm Vedder Price in Chicago. As a former in-house attorney within organizations, Dan understands pressures that in-house counsel face and treats his clients as he expected to be treated when he was the client. Dan is an experienced litigator, having litigated cases in multiple federal courts and having argued multiple federal appeals. Dan has Bachelor of Arts degrees in physics, mathematics, and the Integrated Science program from Northwestern University, and earned his Juris Doctor degree from the Loyola University Chicago School of Law, where he is an adjunct professor of legal writing. Hi, Dan. Welcome to the show. It's great to have you here.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
You bet. And I always like to start with guests with finding out more about your career journey and path. So, what is the story of how you got into the legal field and how you've come to your current work?
Wow, it's the typical boy works at a hot dog stand becomes a lawyer story. You've probably heard it a million times. It started back when I was in fourth grade. We read Alice in Wonderland for an English class, and we did a mock trial afterwards. And I was tasked with defending Alice for trespassing and all the various horrible things she did in Wonderland. And my friend Stephen had broken his arm and was portraying the Mad Hatter. And he testified that Alice had broken his arm, which I knew to be untrue because I had broken his arm on a play date the weekend before. And with that information, conducted a withering cross-examination of him and just sort of got the lawyer bug after that. And when it turned out that I would be a much better lawyer than a physicist, which it took me about the next 15 years to figure out, decided to go to law school.
That's so cool. That sounds like a really fun assignment, though. Yeah. As you were sharing that, it's like I could just envision that.
Yeah,
And
it was a blast, and I, my kids have never done a mock trial in class, and I can't imagine why. But yeah, it's a fun way to test your analytical skills for sure and get the kids involved.
yeah, very fun. And I'm sure you've learned some good lessons along the way. What's a lesson or two that stands out from your career?
Well, don't burn bridges. That's the biggest one. In all of my career transitions, it's been to go work with somebody that I knew or worked with previously who wanted me or knew what they were getting with me, which made the transition that much easier. Those connections are invaluable when you're looking to make a transition. It's to work with people who've known you, who you've worked with in the past. So not burning bridges is really, really important. The other thing is trust yourself, because every career path, whether you have transitions or not, has its moments of doubt. And if you don't trust yourself, it's really hard to navigate that. And the third thing is be open to learning always. Never stop learning. It's too easy to stagnate in a job, especially when you get comfortable. And that's really a blessing and a curse, is being comfortable in a job. And if you are concentrating on always learning, you'll be open to new transitions, new opportunities, even within the same job, even without picking up and moving. It's important to be open to learning. So those are the three things.
That's great. To follow up on that, one of the things you mentioned was trusting yourself. And I'm wondering how you learned to do that. So, what was that process like for you to learn to trust yourself, trust your instincts, trust your judgment?
Yeah, I always had confidence in myself, and probably had too much confidence in myself very early on. Um, High school was a lot easier than college. College got hard because I wasn't, one of the smartest kids in the class anymore, and didn't develop the study habits that somebody who should have developed study habits needed to. And like I said, that's why became clear I wasn't going to be a physicist, because there were some incredibly smart people at Northwestern who went on to do some really amazing things in science. And I realized I had never developed the study habits to start my physics homework 2 weeks before it was due. And I couldn't do it the night before like I did in high school. And so then I had to relearn I had to learn to keep learning. But then you had to trust yourself that, no, if you actually put in the work, if you change the way you approach things, you can get this and you can do it, and you can overcome challenges. And so getting to law school meant relearning how to do that. And then becoming a lawyer, there's no shortcuts.
Right.
You're not cheating yourself. You could cheat a client, and that's really, really bad news. So if you don't learn to be diligent in your work, and if you don't learn to take care, all the talent in the world isn't going to help you. But you had to trust that you could do that. You had to trust that you weren't perfect, and that you needed to learn to do that. And all of that was really important.
Good. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, I think a lot of important lessons wrapped up in that as well. And yeah, it's not like you can skate through law school. So, that's for
No,
sure.
although it's funny. A lot of patent lawyers, which is what I do find they work harder for worse grades in undergrad, because
Mm,
science and math for them is so much harder than just reading.
hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And what else have you found? So as you made different transitions in your career, whether it was going from uh, law firm, practicing in a law firm to working in house or, other career transitions. What else have you found that was particularly helpful for you, whether it was specific decisions you made, resources, people who supported you?
Yeah, it's a great question. The most important thing to me was having my eye on what it was I wanted to be in life. And I'm not talking about like be as a profession, like what I wanted to be as a person. Because if the job that I had wasn't aligning with that, it was the wrong job, full stop, right? Nothing could make that work. And so when I got out of law school and joined a law firm, I was married but had no kids. Knew I was going to have kids at some point, right? I always wanted to be a dad, much more than I wanted to be a lawyer. That was the job I always wanted. So I knew I was going to have kids. And at the time that I was a young associate, like a lot of young associates, to graduate at 23, 24, 25, didn't have kids yet, but knew I wanted to build a foundation for my family. And so those early years, learning how to be a lawyer, working really, really hard at the law firm, was all driven towards, I'm going to provide for that family that I'm going to then start to build, which I did. And then transition to an in-house role because I wanted to be a father more than I thought I could, taking the law firm path to partnership, at 29 or 30, or 31 or 32, whatever I was, 31 about. And again, it was all about the kids who were at that point 5, 3, and -3 months when I left and went in-house. And understanding that I was going to trade salary and ambition for lifestyle. And that was an easy trade for me. Mm-hmm. And then again, fast forward 13 years when those kids become teenagers, wanting to be a dad, but not needing to be the same kind of dad that you need to be when they're 20, 18, and 15 as they are when they're 6, 4, and 1. I had the opportunities to now be more ambitious with my career, go back to a law firm, and still be the dad that I wanted to be for kids who frankly didn't need my time as much anymore. But if I didn't have that in the back of my head, like, what are you doing this for? I wouldn't have anything tethered. And I think that's a recipe for being unhappy in your job. Mm-hmm. At least because you can become happy, I think, if in a job in a short term, but if you're untethered, you'll never be truly happy. And that's what makes people want to pick up and move. But I always knew my kids are taken care of. My primary responsibilities, what I really wanted out of life was, to be able to do this and that. And as long as I was able to do that, I was happy.
That's great. Yeah, very true. And thank you for sharing that. And was there ever a time when you had a regret about a career decision?
Oh, yeah. Look, every time I pick up a magazine or a news story about a new physics discovery, a little piece of me says, you should have stuck with that. That's really interesting. You love that stuff. And then I look at my old textbooks and I realize you've forgotten more than you actually ever knew. And so it makes sense to me. But yeah, I do wonder what if sometimes. Mm-hmm. There are always times where you have the really hard day at work where you wonder, why am I doing this? Is it always going to be like this? And the answer is, for the most part, it's not always going to be like that. Your worst day, your job is never as bad as it is on its worst day. Yeah. Nor is it ever as good as it is on its best day. So you deal with that regret, but you also have a sense for when it's time, and that's not so much regret as just knowing I've accomplished everything I want to accomplish in this role, and then staying beyond that point, I think, might lead to regret. But I've been fortunate to have opportunities to move on when I've started to feel that way.
Yeah, good. And for those who are in career transition, what are some recommendations that you have for how we can stay focused, positive, and especially persevere and stay motivated when things don't go according to plan?
I just keep coming back to, what are you doing it for? And are you able to balance the things that are most important to you? If your career is the most important thing to you, and I'm not going to judge anybody for whom that's the case, then I think you have to ask yourself still, am I doing the thing that reinforces the thing that makes me proudest about myself? Mm-hmm. For me, that's being a dad, and that's having a family. Right? That's the thing that I'm most proud of myself, that I can be a dad and a lawyer, but I can mostly be a dad. And being a lawyer and living relatively comfortably and being able to scratch that intellectual itch helps with all of that. But the thing that I'm proudest of most is being a dad. If the thing that I was proudest of most were solving problems, writing briefs, because I was so proud of my ability as a writer, then I would just make sure that my job is always reinforcing the things that make me feel proud about myself. And I tell that to my kids as they're getting older and thinking about college and beyond. I tell that to my law students who are wondering, what should I do with this law degree? I always tell them, well, do you know what makes you most proud of yourself? Mm-hmm. If you do something that reinforces that. Because if you don't, you're going to be untethered to the best things about yourself.
Yeah, that's great. And for you, throughout your career and life, who would you say has been most influential that's really contributed to who you are?
Well, for sure, my dad, who worked way too hard, still, in his 70s, works much harder than he should. And it took me a while to recognize how dedicated he was to us, because he was working all the time. He wasn't an absentee father. He just worked. And he loved working. And that work ethic rubbed off on me. Certainly, my grandfather, who was a war hero, came back after World War II and drove a school bus. That work ethic, it was that rubbed off on me. Even though he was gone by the time I was 10 or 11. I knew about him, certainly spending time with him until that age, and learned more about him after he passed. That made me even prouder. And then again, it's my kids. Mm-hmm. They challenge me, and they challenge me to be a better person, because I want to model for them, like my father did for me, like my grandfather and the memory of him does for me. Like I am incredibly conscious of modeling for my kids, and teaching them how to balance work and life, and being present in their life, in the life moments. And they're really a big influence on me, because they're the reason that I do it.
That's great. Yeah, and I agree, just looking to models, and being that role model, to me is really important as well, right? So, it really speaks to your integrity. So walking your talk, I think. So important to do that for sure. Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Great. Yeah. Well, thanks so much, Dan, for sharing that and your lessons and about your career path, your journey. We really appreciate it for our listeners to hear that. And it's already time for our next break. So when we come back, Dan and I will talk in more detail about life in our mid-career phase and making a successful transition. Hi, I'm Lisa Downs, career and retirement transition coach and host of Reigniting You on KIXI. I guide age 40-plus professionals to gain clarity, a renewed sense of purpose, and a career transition plan within 90 days so you can lead a fulfilling life regardless of your age. If you're not sure what's next for you, I can help. Let's talk about what your future can look like. Visit yournewaspect.com or call me at 425-216-3015. That's 425-216-3015. New Aspect Coaching. Fresh perspectives for your career.
Have a career transition related question or want to share your best or worst job story? Call 360-436-6496. That's 360-436-6496. Just leave a voicemail and we'll answer your question or share your story on a future show. Stay tuned for more Reigniting You with Lisa Downs.
Welcome back to Reigniting You, the show that discusses timely issues and topics about career transition for Gen Xers and Boomers. I'm your host, Lisa Downs. A reminder that if you'd like to get in touch, you can head on over to my website, yournewaspect.com. There you can download and take my free career transition readiness quiz, as well as sign up to receive my free weekly career tips e-newsletter. Or just drop me a note. It'd be great to hear from you. That's yournewaspect.com. So we're here with attorney Dan Shulman. So Dan, let's go ahead and jump back into our conversation. For many of us in our 40s and 50s who are starting to think about empty nests and what winding down in our careers could look like, it can be the most pressure-packed time in our careers. What's your advice for how we can get through this time period successfully, since we don't necessarily have the energy we once did in our 20s and 30s?
Well, hopefully what you lack in energy, you make it up for with wisdom and clarity. I know a whole lot more about myself and what I really want out of life than I did in my 20s and 30s. And so in a lot of ways, I feel much more prepared for a transition in my 40s than I did when I was younger and didn't have either the self-confidence or self-belief or the stability to make a transition. And I think, when you are young, and I consider 20s and 30s young, you're still processing so many things in life. Mm-hmm. And not like you ever stop, because Lord knows I'm still a work in progress. But I had this conversation, I think, with my kids at some point recently. And I said, look, you spend the first 20 years of your life contemplating and reacting to what the world thinks you are and should be. Mm-hmm. Right? That's the high school peer pressure. You get assigned a role, you try to figure out your identity, and then you spend the next 20 years of your life peeling it away and figuring out which parts of that was BS and which part of it was real. And it takes 20 years to build up wrong and 20 years to deconstruct. And so you get to 40 and hopefully you achieve a level of understanding at that point. And if you've done that work, and I think it's almost impossible not to, because you'll confront it at some point in your life, either personally or professionally, that I'm not the person that I was in high school or college or earlier in my marriage or whatever that is. There will be a moment that you confront that. And when you do, hopefully, with the help of friends, maybe a therapist, maybe a spouse, whatever that is, transition will seem like growth, uncomfortable growth, right? Because all growth is uncomfortable. You don't grow out of your shoes without your toes feeling smushed, right? All growth is uncomfortable, but in a transition is growth. And so at 40, you understand discomfort equals growth, not discomfort equals something to be avoided. And the quicker you learn that, I think the better position you are to make a meaningful transition.
Yeah, very true. Yeah, just doing that work to really get to know yourself and comfortable in your own skin. And yeah, who are you at your core, right? What are you about? What's your real makeup, not all those personas that we embodied earlier in our career. I'm also curious about what some issues are that you personally have seen crop up with your clients, colleagues, friends in midlife that are different from those in our younger days, and how do you see those issues impacting our careers?
Well, the two biggest things that happen in your 40s typically are, and not for everybody, but for enough people, divorce. And so that in itself is a painful transition and opportunity to learn about yourself. And aging parents, both of which are incredible mental and emotional drains. And I don't care how comfortable you are in your job. I don't care how amicable your divorce is. I don't care how well off your parents are, an ability for them to, be comfortable in their retirement, which hopefully they are, but so few really are. That will take away from your focus at work, from your feeling that it's a safe time to make a transition, because you don't want to upset the apple cart when other things are moving. And the aging parents in the divorce are not everybody goes through them, but sure seems like a lot of people go through it. And as you get into your 40s, sort of reinforces what we were just talking about, that if you don't trust in yourself and know what to fall back on, it makes it very, very hard to divide yourself into all the pieces that need to be divided into to take care of everybody in your orbit, including yourself, at that time. And that makes it really scary to make a job transition.
It does.
Right? It's you might tend to make a job transition just purely for money, because you feel like I've got to support my parents now in addition to myself and my alimony and child support and my growing kids who will be in college before I know it. And you just go chase the better paying job. And look, that's great. I mean, I moved up to a better paying job when I left in-house and went to a law firm. But it wasn't the money that made me move so much as that was a byproduct of a different kind of job, with a different kind of experience, with a different challenge for me, where the upside was bigger, but I was taking the risk. And for me, when I made that move at 45, I'd already had my divorce in the rearview mirror for quite a long time. And in fact, it just got remarried around the time that I left, which has been phenomenal, and a phenomenal source of stability. Only halfway tongue in cheek, but sometimes, your marriage in your 40s is the right one, because you know so much more than you do at 23 when I first got married, which was right at the time. But so that lends that stability. And having seen my kids grow up, because I had them early, I had my youngest by the time I was 32. I had 3 kids because I wanted to have them out of the house and be able to relax at 50. And so I had those things that I keep coming back to about being confident in yourself, knowing yourself, having that support. And so now that my parents are aging, I'm dealing with that in a way that I didn't deal with, in my late 30s and early 40s. But it's there now, and having to deal with it. And I feel just so much more secure in my role as a father, that and secure in my job, and proud of myself and happy with where I am in life, and having a wonderful wife, that doing that extra to take care of aging parents. And I have a brother and sister too, but doing that extra to take care of my aging parents doesn't drain me like it would have maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago.
Yeah. And as you entered your 40s with your law career, what were some changes that you made, and kind of responding to changes that happened to you as well, to give you more capacity since you're hitting the peak years of your career?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly started. Well, so by that time I was probably 3/4 of the way through my in-house job, and starting to feel like, not because I didn't like it, and not because it still wasn't challenging, because it was, but I could see that I was going to run out of challenges. There was a runway to that job at 40, and started to think more long term about what were the skills that I was developing. How big was my networking group? Because knowing that within the next 4 or 5 years, I might be looking for something else, and so I made a point to go to different conferences and to do a lot of speaking engagements and a lot of writing to really build my personal brand in the legal community, because either I was going to want a connection to give me a different job for a new challenge, or I thought I might go back to private practice, which is what I did, and I would need to build a client base. And so those colleagues who were also in-house lawyers at companies all around the country, big and small, that I would meet at conferences every, 2 or 3 times a year, those would be my potential clients. Those are people that I had met as their peer and other in-house counsel say, well, I want to work with you because you were also an in-house counsel, you get it. Yeah. And so I started thinking about that long term, and I had a boss that let me go out to those conferences and understood this was not going to be a forever job. He was happy to have me as long as I wanted to be there, but he knew that it was probably not a forever job. And so I started to think about those things and do the things that I could in that role to make me better at my next job. Mm-hmm. Again, having a very tolerant boss for me taking on or saying, I want to do this. I want this challenge. I want to be in charge of this because I want to learn a new skill. Trust me. It was a sort of thing where, well, why am I going to let you do it? We could pay outside counsel to do it. They're the experts. Because I need to know, I need to remind myself I can still do this work.
Yeah.
And so that was really important.
Great. And you had mentioned earlier too about, relationship evolving with your kids. And of course, as the kids grow, that relationship changes and, what home life looks like changes. And for those who are experiencing empty nests, what recommendations do you have for how they can adapt and grow and continue to grow since life isn't as centralized around the kids necessarily as it once was?
I think that goes back to something I said earlier about always doing the things that reinforce what makes you proud of yourself. And if you always had built your identity around your kids, as it might sound like I do, that's probably not entirely healthy in the long run. But kids naturally age and outgrow their need for their parents, so they sort of help in that process. Part of the reason why I was able to go back to private practice is they basically kicked me out of the house. I used to come home at a reasonable hour and spend time with them and make dinner, and I started to come home at like 4:30, 5 o'clock and not see them until 9 o'clock at night. Not because they weren't home, it was because they didn't come out of their bedroom. And I thought, well, then why aren't I working downtown with the challenge? And then I'll just be home at 6:30 instead. They're not missing me. They don't even know when I walked in the door. So kids sort of help you transition to that emptiness role, right? But as they're doing that, I think, and I haven't gone through it entirely yet, I have one kid in college, that you can't mourn that loss and be stuck, right? You start to find out what are other things that you can do. Maybe your work picks up the slack, and that's fine. I've got a relatively new marriage. I mean, it's been 2 years, but that provides me a lot of sort of the personal growth and the personal satisfaction, right? That the time that I had with the kids, I gave up. It's not the quality, but it's definitely the quantity. Yeah. And so, but again, I love learning about myself. I love the interpersonal relationships. I love caring for the people that I love in life. And that's what makes me proud of myself. So I have that, and I was able to find it because my kids, I think, still love me. They tolerate me. They love me. They might not like me all the time, but I think they love me. They tell me every so often, sometimes under their breath on a telephone call before they hang up, but they do say it from time to time. And that helps. I mean, it certainly helps. And then, there's plenty of people like you who can help folks, with those transitions. And maybe I'll call you in 5 years ago. I thought I had this figured out, but really I didn't. Lisa helped me.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, and speaking of that, so there is a perception out there that attorneys, like many others in high stress, high adrenaline careers, professions, have a tough time retiring and exiting the profession. So, have you seen that? And if so, what impact do you think that has on attorneys and their families when they have a tough time with that exit or, seeing life after being a lawyer?
For sure. Although sometimes the job has a way of retiring you,
Hmm.
and that's true in any walk of life. But um, one of the reasons why being an attorney is so tough in the rates of alcoholism and depression and divorce are so high among attorneys is because at this time that we're talking about, which is really critical for self-discovery and building new types of relationships with your wife, children, and parents, is the most stressful time in your job because these are your peak earning years in your
Yeah.
40s. When as a partner, you're supposed to be out there bringing in business. And look, if you don't have confidence in yourself, if things are unraveling, it's hard to portray to a client, a relation that you should be in a relationship with me. People see through that. There's a people aspect to business development, and if you're not confident, if you are struggling, it makes it very hard to go pitch yourself. Right? People
Mhm.
can detect that there's something going on there, and you can't hide it for very long. Sometimes you can act well enough, but over the long term, it gets really hard. And so I think that process of it's difficult being a lawyer starts at exactly the wrong time uh,
Mhm.
for a lot of people. Then as you
Mhm.
move on, I think depending on your situation, law firms can be unforgiving.
Mhm.
Um, if you're not bringing in the business that you used to bring in, if you are slowing down, either by choice or not by choice, maybe there's um, just age is catching up to you and you're not as sharp. You don't have the stamina. You can't get on a plane and go visit clients as much as you used to. You're not learning new ways to network and do business. You haven't learned. You've just figured out how to. You've just learned how to stop using a typewriter, and now you have to figure out Zoom. I mean, forget about it, right? Um, and so that's where I think for lawyers, the model is as you move up, you have to continue to mentor young lawyers because the law firm model doesn't work if that doesn't happen. A lot of law firms, they don't work because that doesn't happen. And you see younger lawyers and younger partners and help them get a start by giving your client and your relationships and introducing them so that they have a book of business and you can ease out.
Yeah, that's great,
Yeah,
Dan. And I hate to cut you off, but we do need to stop there in the
sure.
interest of time. But yeah, I really appreciate that and your recommendations. And if someone would like to get in touch with you, how can they find you?
Yep. So Vedder Price's website, www.vedder, search Daniel Shulman and you'll find me. You can find me on LinkedIn. And I'm sure, Lisa, if somebody wants to reach out to you, you can pass along an email.
Great.
But dshulman@vedderprice.com is the email. DSHULMAN@vedderprice.com.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for being here, Dan. We
Thank
really
you.
appreciate it and all the great conversation and recommendations. Great to have you here.
It was so wonderful, and I really
Yeah.
appreciate it. Thank you, Lisa.
My pleasure. And it's time to wrap up today's show. And that means it's also time for my reignition recommendation, your weekly career transition tip, regardless of your age. And so, my tip for you this week, in the interest of Thanksgiving, is to act on your gratitude. So, not just recognizing what you're grateful for in your gratitude journal or whatever that is, but acting on it. So telling people that you are grateful to have them in your life or what you appreciate about them or just expressing and articulating that gratitude is important too. So how can you act on it in addition to noting it and thinking about it? So taking action on that gratitude is my tip for you this week. And a reminder that if you'd like to get in touch, you can head on over to my website, yournewaspect.com. Well, Eric, thanks for your support today, as always. So what did you find interesting from our time with Dan?
Oh, great conversation. I'm not an attorney and I've never had kids.
Me either. Me either.
So I'm not doing the empty nest thing, but I know a lot of people that are definitely going through that change, and it is hard for them. So I'm going to have recommend this podcast for folks out there that are doing that.
Excellent. Well, join us next Monday at 3:00 when my guest will be author and certified financial transition coach and advisor, Judy Snyder. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next week on Reigniting You.